Hello and welcome to Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. I am your host, Louis Carlin, and I'm very excited today. Today I have a very, very special guest. Been wanting to talk to this guy for a long time, but my colleague Myron keeps stealing him from me. But today I got him on the show, and I'm very happy to have him. My next guest, he's an announcer for C4, Torture Chamber Wrestling, ISW, and recently he was brought onto the Seaway Valley Wrestling team. Please help me welcome, and I'm very happy to welcome, finally to the show, the one and only announcer extraordinaire, Dr. Bob. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bob.
Louis, it's a pleasure to be here. Myron does seem to want my presence a little more here and there, but I'm happy to be here finally, and thanks for having me. Hey,
my pleasure, my pleasure. It's good to have you on here. We get two big shows coming up, Femmes Fatales 21 in Ottawa, February 22nd, Seaway Valley Wrestling, Love Hurts, February 9th in Cornwall, and we're going to be previewing those cards a bit later on. But I had a few questions I want to talk to you about, if that's good to go, Dr. Bob.
That sounds good. I have my big cup of coffee here. I'm not exactly RJ City or anything, but I'm ready to go here.
Yeah, not too many people are RJ City. I mean, hopefully you're not in your underwear. You're fully clothed and drinking your coffee.
I am fully clothed, but as I'm on audio, you will never know. Go ahead.
Okay, there you go. So I was always interested. You're very good at what you do. You're an excellent announcer. So how did you get interested in announcing to begin with?
Thanks. That's a great question. I have been watching wrestling ever since. I'm sure you've heard a lot of these comments from wrestlers and people working backstage, but I've been watching wrestling my entire life. My father watched wrestling. My grandfather watched wrestling. We all enjoyed different things about it, but it's been handed down almost generation by generation. And my brother watches wrestling, and ever since I was a kid, I really enjoyed it. I knew from I'd say when I was 12, 13, that I didn't really want to take bumps. All that looked pretty scary. All that looked pretty detrimental to your health. So I always wanted to get involved, wanted to do something with it. And then I sort of fell in love with how the storytelling aspect worked in terms of just listening to the commentators and what they had and what they brought to the table. I mean, my earliest inspirations that I really enjoyed were sort of Bobby the Brain Heenan and his repartee with Gorilla Monsoon.
Okay.
But I really enjoyed Bobby, and then when he moved over to WCW, enjoyed him as well. But the guy who really sparked sort of, I think, personally, now that I look back on the last 3 years of sort of working in different feds, is Mike Tenay and his style. I know some people have preferences on it, and I'm not saying necessarily that Mike's my favorite, Tenay rather, but the way that he goes about his commentary, the way that he brings up facts, the way that he speaks about some of the details, background, and all the information that somebody doesn't necessarily have, it really resonated with me. And I remember there was a WCW call where he was going on about his experience with the When Worlds Collide, the pay-per-view. And Heenan stopped, whether it was in character or not, and just said something akin to, is there anything you don't know? And that little moment, that was an aha moment for me. The light switch just went off, and I said, wow, I want to be that guy. I want to do that. I want other commentators and wrestling fans to listen to me and go, wow, he knows a lot. And from what I've done and the amount of research and just being part of shows for so long and going to indie shows for the last close to 12 years now, just every show I can, set aside some time for. It's always been a passion. And since then, I've been going to indie shows, been watching and just crazy amounts of wrestling, almost an embarrassing amount of wrestling weekly, and I'm sure you could relate.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And going to the shows, and then I started to get involved in the scene. And at first, it was a slow sort of trickle, as any wrestler I'm sure would say as well. And then started networking, get out to companies, and now I've been to, I'd say, almost every big company in the Ontario, Quebec region, and I'm trying to expand even further. And there's a few that I haven't touched here and there, but I'm getting out there. And long-winded answer here, but I'll get into more details about some of the smaller feds as well. Not exactly a WCW or anything here that I want to say that I work with Tenay, but he's definitely influenced me. And there's been other commentators all along the way who I've really emulated and enjoyed listening to, of course.
Now, you said Tenay wasn't necessarily your favorite. Do you have a favorite commentator? Because personally, mine is Gordon Soley. I grew up. I love Gordon Soley.
Yeah, Soley was always amazing because I think everyone would agree that he brought that air of legitimacy to it, and he brought it and called it much different, I'd say, than a lot of us other commentators. A form of sort of almost treating wrestling with a lot more respect than perhaps some other commentators had, taking out the hokiness of it. Soli was great. Also, by the same token and same sort of almost same kind of style, I'd say, Lance Russell was always an inspiration as well.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Lance was always amazing as well. Let's see. Heenan for just the color commentary always cracked me up. I'm liking a lot of what I've heard recently if we're looking at a newer generation as well. A lot of recently with Corey Graves. Morrow has his days as well where he's really on point. And funny enough, even though he's not a commentator, the interactions between Paul Heyman and Jim Ross were always great when they had that short stint together.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember listening to that and going, wow, that's some good stuff. And I mean, I think I've read elsewhere that they really did enjoy working with each other, but it almost, that sort of heat between them almost sparked a little bit of added, maybe some professional rivalry in there. And you could kind of hear them trying to outshine each other and work harder with each other. And that was great. In terms of favorites, I'd have to say Bobby Heenan as a color was always my favorite, but he definitely isn't the style that I'm trying to bring right now.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that you're a big fan of Paul Heyman and Jim Ross. I was a huge fan of that too, but almost all of my friends, they hated it. They were like, when's Jerry Lawler coming back? I'd rather have Jerry Lawler with Jim Ross, but I absolutely loved it. So for me to hear you say that, I'm glad somebody else besides me enjoyed listening to Paul Heyman and Jim Ross. So, you've just scored points for me, Dr. Bob. So that's terrific, man.
Well, that's what I want to do here today. I mean, Paul Heyman as well, he's so charismatic and everything. You see him obviously as a ring announcer mostly, but even some of the backstage skits that he was part of well before he was with Brock, anything he's done, sort of the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-views where he did his promo at the beginning, any role you give him with the microphone, he seems to shine. And it's a very, very tough job that he has right now, talking about Brock and Brock only week in, week out, and yet he still makes it interesting 99% of the time. It's very admirable that he has that skill and ability to just push the same topic. You know, other guys, other managers, I know he's not a manager, quote unquote, but other managers seem to have, a whole stable behind them that can talk about different people, different feuds coming up, and Paul's in the unenviable task of only having to push one guy. So you would think it gets very repetitive, but he's been doing an amazing job. And I mean, also my personal guilty pleasure in terms of wrestling commentating, and I've told this to all my friends, I don't think anyone understands it quite, but my personal favorites are, in terms of a duo, I know everyone's going to say Heenan and Gorilla, or Gorilla and Jesse Ventura, and Jim Ross and King and all these superstar duos, and I'm a fan of all of them, of course. But my favorite as a guilty pleasure, was always the Sunday night heat duo of Jonathan Coachman, the Coach, and Al Snow.
Okay.
And I'll explain you why here. Heat's actually my favorite show of all time in terms of they give you the wrestling. Everything's easy to digest, 5 to 8 minutes on the usual for matches. You get indie guys coming in, having a little shot, and sometimes they'll get a little offense. Then you got the occasional mid-card as a main event, and I've always been a fan of the mid-card guys because I think once you get to the main event, it's sort of like you've been overexposed, and I'm going to see the same guys up there at the top. But the main event guys would always show up at Heat as the mid-card guys. And Coach and Snow always brought this sort of teamwork that they were friends sitting on a couch watching wrestling. It completely always sounded like they were just calling it from their basement. I know they were doing it in post as well, so I can see that. They were having fun. They didn't really follow the rules. If they didn't like a guy, they would just kind of jokingly trash him, make fun of him, and it always sounded like it was two good friends sitting in the room with you watching what I would say was not the top caliber wrestling, with any huge storylines. And then you'd have great characters come in like Just Incredible in his gigantic losing streak, Stevie Richards, and was she Victoria at that point? I think she was Victoria.
Yeah.
As like the king and queen of Heat, and I heard that Stevie Richards would even wanted to bring a Sunday Night Heat belt out. And you had all these people that were kind of throwaways, not really relevant on the main card as main eventers, but then Coach and Snow just having a blast calling it, and I always really, really enjoyed Heat for that reason, and it was pretty great. I mean, other guys that I've enjoyed as well, that I failed to mention too is sort of ECW's commentary team in terms of styles. Yeah. Okay. And he had a few partners back and forth. I think the longest one, if memory serves me correct, was Cyrus. So that duo too was great because Cyrus, he was almost even better back then because he was just very smarmy and you kind of wanted to smack him. Here, there's a lot of more professionalism, I'd say, in his recent run with New Japan. Okay. But that smarmy kind of straight up heel Cyrus is always a great favorite of mine as well. So, there's a lot. As you think about all the wrestling I've watched, and you've watched, there's hundreds of duos you could think of and trios that have really shined over the years. So it's a quite a memorable and pleasurable walk on the memory lane.
Well, what about before he took over and it was working for his dad? I thought Vince McMahon was absolutely fantastic back in the 70s. Can I ask how old you are by chance?
Yeah, sure. I'm 34 right now. 34. I've been watching wrestling since I was 5, but I mean, I'm on a personal kick of watching sort of anything. I mean, some people, it's sort of funny because I hear some people say, "Oh, I love old school wrestling," and I know right away that their definition of old school, depending on who I'm talking to, is different. And I go, "Oh, so what's old school for you?" Whether they're younger or not, but they go, "Oh, I loved Raw in the 91, 92," and I go, "Ooh." I just finished watching some black and white footage from the 1950s. I got on a big kick of Bronco Nagurski matches just 2 weeks ago, and it was phenomenal. I love that fire they brought. He wasn't the most technically savvy, but that sort of that oomph he brought to the ring, and he was like one of the biggest crossover stars from the NFL at that time too. So it's stuff like that. And I've been watching all the old Japanese wrestling and like pre New Japan, of course, but I'm always, every week I can go back to 90s All Japan, but even further back before the Four Pillars of Heaven, I would watch stuff with Rikito-san and the personal, that there's that Korean connection. I'm Korean for any fans here, but there's a personal connection with like Rikito-san and Kintaro Oki / Kim Hill. So, I'll go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s and watch some Japanese footage. It's great to watch all this old stuff as well. I kind of went awry of your questions. So if you want to,
no, it's okay. No, it's okay. No, because I'm a little older than you. I started watching 1978. My grandfather introduced me to a gentleman that went by the name of Bruno Sammartino. So that's how I got into wrestling. And Vince McMahon, I thought was fantastic by himself. That's why I brought him up. And then I don't know, if you go back to the mid 70s. I don't know. They brought in Argentina Rocca to be his. He was awful. I'm sorry, but that was.
You know what? But he was Rocca was the precursor of a lot of the high flying you see now.
Yeah.
A lot of people owe him a debt of gratitude in terms of him bringing a different style, and Bruno obviously was a crowd favorite. Most sellouts in Madison Square Garden.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I don't mean in terms of wrestling. I mean they brought him in as an announcer.
Sorry. I was like,
as a wrestler.
Rocca was terrible.
Yeah, as a wrestler, he was fantastic. But they brought him in as an announcer with Vince McMahon for 2 or 3 months. But he couldn't keep up with Vince McMahon. He was just horrible, and then they finally got rid of him.
Arguably too. I don't want to speak ill will of the dead here, but I mean, Bruno was not a great commentator either, and he did a few things here. Somehow Savage wasn't great either, and I'm perplexed because that man had oodles of charisma, yet he wasn't that great. Piper didn't do a very good job. You have a lot of guys who should be very charismatic, but I mean, I guess it goes to show you that wrestling commentary is hard. You can't just take some guy who's an absolute crowd favorite sticking behind an announce table and he shines. Like there's been many an instance where they've tried to bring in big names and they haven't done super great either.
So who do you think's the greatest announcer of all time? If you could pick one person, who would you say is the greatest announcer of all time besides Dr. Bob?
Oh, well, I definitely wouldn't put myself in that pantheon.
Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I want to be, and that is my goal. Okay. But that wouldn't be the top guy. In terms of, because greatest is very subjective, obviously, there's no real measures of it.
Sure.
But in terms of just overall impact, I think I would probably get stoned if I didn't mention Soli.
Okay.
So a lot of people will put Jim Ross up there, but I mean, personally, I don't see Jim Ross in an upper top 5 at all. So it's, I would say probably Soli would have to be given the good, top, sort of commentator. Lance Russell, I think also, like, I already mentioned it, but like in a very close second. And in terms of just, color, I mean, Ventura and Heenan shined, and I think both of those guys would be battling for the top 2 spots, 1 and 2 spots as a color.
So if you could do play-by-play, with any announcer, living or dead, would it be Mike Tenay or Lance Russell?
Mike, you know what? Mike, just by his style, I never really thought of him as a play-by-play guy. Sometimes he had to carry guys like Don West, but Mike is more interesting when you give him snippets of background information and all the plethora of knowledge he has. So I would like to do work with Mike Tenay, which, I mean, in the realm of everyone getting signed nowadays, I think that's a possibility. I don't think I'd be shooting too far above my for the stars here to try to work with Mike at one point or another. But Mike Tenay, I'd like to work with him. I don't know if he would be a play-by-play color. I'd love the chance to work with him. And I mean, obviously, I think Bobby Heenan would be every commentator's dream to work with.
Sure.
Rest in peace. And so yeah, maybe not a trio, kind of hard, and as is evidenced by Nitro, but yeah, some combination of Bobby and Mike would be an absolute dream for me. And of course, just for my guilty pleasure, if I could work with Coach and Snow just one time, if they ever duoed again, that'd be that would be my personal win in my wrestling career.
So
I might have to book that myself, actually.
yeah, maybe one day they'll bring back Sunday Night Heat, and they could.
Yeah. Oh my God. If I could bring back Sunday Night Heat, that pretty much could die a happy man.
So how do you prepare for each show? I mean, I know you have like 8 or 9 matches that you have to call the shots on. So like, what kind of preparation goes into each show?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, if I can segue that too, I'll answer 2. I'll get 2 birds with 1 stone here. But
sounds good.
Let's say example: Seaway Valley Wrestling 2, Love Hurts, coming up very soon. Next week, actually, February 9th.
9th, yeah.
Saturday. I don't know when this comes out, but it'll be coming up Saturday, February 9th. So let's go through a card here, and I'm not going to spoil anything, of course. But in terms of preparation, so the matches have been announced. There's nothing on this card that I have that hasn't been announced, I believe. And so, for an example, Sheldon Jean, Josh Alexander, co-main event, one of the most highly anticipated matches I've seen in quite some time out of Ontario wrestling, especially sort of Cornwall, I would assume. And how do I prepare for that? So I've known Sheldon pretty well here in the last few. I think I speak with him more than most wrestlers in the last few 6 months. We drive together a lot to places like Torture Chamber in Montreal, great promotion as well. And I've got to talk to him at shows. I know him. And Josh, I don't know as well. I've seen him plenty of times, but we never really have, these long extending chats. He's so busy and he meets so many people that like I'll see him at C4 and every month. But we haven't really had this chat. So Sheldon, I'll just pick up some of his information. I know that he is a NOAA student, wrestled there. I know some of his past opponents. I know his style after watching him, get to understand his inspirations. When I meet a new wrestler, for example, if I never spoke to Josh before, I would want to know what his sort of gimmick is, if I've never seen him. I would want to know if he has any sort of, maybe not a catchphrase, perhaps, but at least sort of a moniker. So the walking weapon is Josh Alexander. It's a pretty indicative of his style. He's a weapon. He's going to come and just try to hurt you because he's so powerful, so strong, and so vicious. But also recently he's been calling himself sort of the gatekeeper of Canadian wrestling. And that gives me a lot to work with. His last match was against, was against Matt Angel for the championship, C4. I'm not giving away any spoilers because it's already online. but he won the title against him. Matt Angel was a huge underdog for that match, but as a champion, you go champion's advantage. But how I went ahead with that is I made a little story in my head before the match happened while I was preparing. Okay, so I know there's an underdog, but he's a champion. But he's fighting against a guy who clearly is better than him in almost everything, that is stronger, more powerful, has experience advantage, has already won the championship, was one of C4's top draws, one of the longest reigning champions. So I have all this information in my head, and I got to figure out what to do with it, how to call a story. And then a light bulb went off. I said, gatekeeper. He's the gatekeeper. Matt Angel is the gate crasher. I'm going to call him the gate crasher. And then I almost built a whole story in my head of how that's going to happen. And using that little soundbite, I was able to incorporate it in the commentary. I was really happy with how that sounded. And then I built a tiny story up. If it's just 8 matches that are cool matches, then I don't really have much to work with. So I'll just call moves. But if I know that there's a little bit going behind there, if I know kind of what the story is, if I know this guy is really getting pushed and I want to sort of look at it and say, hey, this new guy, let's see, Joe Blow, whoever, is going to be at the face of our company, then, I know to prepare by going, what does Joe Blow do? What are his moves? Does he have any notable victories over other big stars that somebody on a new fan might want to hear about? What is his style? Who did he train with? I have all these little facts so that I can bring them up, a la Mike Tenay, and just talk about those and build a story around his next opponent. Well, his next opponent might be bigger, might be stronger, but, he's got a lot of heart. And then the old wrestling tropes of, you're smaller but have more heart. And I can build a story around that as well. So that preparation is about looking up information, knowing what the story, what the business of it is, trying to figure out, especially given sort of the next few months of booking, do I know it? Do I know what's happening? Is it something important for me to mention? If this guy is just a one-off deal and he's a great wrestler, but they're flying him in and then he's not going to come back for another 6 months, then, I'm not going to push this guy to the moon. I'd rather push the guy who's our hometown hero.
Sure.
So that's the preparation, and places like sending messages to the wrestlers, talking to them in person, reviewing stuff like Cage Match. If I have time to look over their, matches online, there's plenty of sources off of Twitter as well now that I can, kind of pull up different GIFs of them as well to see, okay, that's his finisher, that's what it looks like. And that communication, I want to be a guy that's dependable and a guy that's well known as being prepared for a match. I don't ever want to just be thrown on a card and said, here, just talk about them. Because to me, that's pointless. Well, I was told very early in my wrestling career here, or commentator career, that you have to differentiate yourself and you have to be value added. If you come in and you're doing commentary, if you're doing ring announcing too, but especially commentary here, a fan has to listen to you and say, why is this guy talking? What is his value added? What am I listening to him for? And if I can't, position myself and have a value proposition that I'm there to interest you, to push something along, then, and there's a good reason I'm there, then, my existence there, my even being behind commentary is pointless. I need to bring something that's above and beyond what a fan could do. And then all this preparation and all this sort of background information that I have, it really differentiates me and makes me, okay, this guy is a voice of some knowledge and authority. Let's listen to him. And also, obviously be entertaining. But going back to Seaway for a second, too, some of the matches here, Evil Uno versus Von Vertigo. Evil Uno's on a tear all over Canada, becoming one of the most well-known Canadian talents across the world, I'd say. You've seen plenty of his matches as well, Lewis. I'm sure you've been impressed with everything he's done.
Well, Evil Uno, I tweeted many times. I've seen many Evil Uno matches, and I have never seen one bad Evil Uno match. The guy is absolutely fantastic.
If you want a little trip down memory lane again, I have some old footage from when I first started going to indie shows in about 2017/2018. And Uno was about 170 pounds in pleather pants with sort of Hot Topic type game t-shirts coming out. And this is even before Chikara and his run there where he got more famous. But
sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing way back then. He was a kid back then. Yeah, old IWS videos that they're definitely worth checking out. You could already see his great potential there. You have matches like Double Dragon, Brooklyn Foot, and Merides versus versus Mario, the sophisticated Afro-Canadian, Buck Gunderson, Kane and Cable, like a lot of up and coming talent in there. I'm very good friends with at least 4 of them in there, and it's going to be exciting. It's going to definitely bring in a lot of fans and friends from them, and then hopefully create more new fans because there's a lot of fire and spunk in these young kids. Not all of them young, but a lot of the newer guys. Jody Threat, Alexia Nicole is the one and only women's match. Yeah, the only women's match on the card, and I think they're really going to bring it. Both of them have been super impressive in everything they've done, and I mean they're getting new fans all the time with the rise of women's wrestling in the last 3-4 years. It really has sort of, I don't want to say peaked because it could get bigger as well, but like really has become on the forefront of professional wrestling, women's wrestling, intergender wrestling, and all that. Yeah. Those two are going to have a great show.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Jody Thread. I've seen her a couple times here live, and she's just absolutely fantastic. She's a future superstar. And Alexia Nicole as well, the Bubblegum Princess. She's also very, very, very talented. So that really should be a really good match.
Yeah, and I hear Vanessa Craven's going to be in the house too, so it'll be nice to see her. Yeah, she's not cleared to wrestle yet, but she's going to be in the house.
Okay.
Rukin, Ari Azteca. I only saw Ari for the first time last year, but I mean he's really impressive. He's out of the tri-state region, and that place is just a hotbed for wrestling. Like coming out of New York, off the top of my head, I can name like 20, 30 indie wrestlers out of New York who are like absolutely going to be probably signed in the next few years. There's James Stone in that as well. One of the sort of standard bearers for wrestling in Ontario and Quebec. Stu Grayson, Mark Wheeler should be absolutely amazing. Stu Grayson, I think more new fans from my experience talk about Grayson as shows than almost any other wrestler, and it's with, I don't mean to, pick out any other wrestlers, but like he is impressive from the get-go. As soon as his entrance music hits and you see him come out and that sort of energy that it brings, and he has a presence, and that man is going to make big money, and it's a shame he hasn't, been on TV every week yet, but he's absolutely, they say born and bred for combat, but I think born and bred for television wrestling is also a pretty good moniker for him. One of your favorites, Kobe Christ, is also there too.
Kobe Christ.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the man. It's going to be my first time seeing him live. I know he's been doing some wrestling over like at NSPW as well. I haven't made my way out there in the last while. It's been about a year since I last went up to Quebec City, but yeah, it's amazing. This guy's going to be one of the guys that comes out of that Maritimes region in Nova Scotia to really break out. And I'm actually calling your boys too a lot, New Hook and Connor.
Oh yeah, Sabotage. Sabotage.
Yeah, I've been calling Sabotage matches because they've had now 2 or 3 matches at Torture Chamber, and they've become one of the top 5 contenders here for the tag team belts. So, they've come on out, and there's big matches ahead for them. So if you also get out to Montreal, let me know because we'll get you a good seat there, and you can watch some of your Maritime favorites wrestle.
Okay, sounds good. Kobe Christ actually he just released a new promo for the match against Ray Donovan, which was absolutely fantastic.
It happened as we spoke, I think.
Yeah, no, about 45 minutes ago. It came out.
So I'll be watching that as soon as we get offline here.
Actually, I watched it quickly. He can cut a promo. Kobe Christ is super, super talented in the ring, cutting promos. As you said earlier, I'm a huge Kobe Christ fan, and I think he's going to go far in professional wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a tag team match too. Ryan Law, Nix, Dino Benjamin. It's going to be a fun one as well, and we've seen some of the Cecil Nix, Lance Law sort of feud building up here. Yep. Sheldon Jean, Josh Alexander spoke about that one. That's going to be really good.
That's going to be fantastic. I wish Seaway Valley Wrestling could get on independent wrestling, so I could watch it.
It's only been one show, but I'd be surprised if they don't make it onto some sort of streaming sometime soon. I don't have that information back with me. I'm not trying to hold anything back, but I'd be surprised if they're not somewhere very, very soon. Yeah, and it'd be great if we could get more eyes on the product as well. I'm super happy with independent wrestling and their TV and their streaming channel rather. And how people from around the world now, especially based off of the reaction on Twitter, have been watching stuff like C4. Like,
oh yeah,
they might not know my face, but they're hearing my voice, and to take a second for myself here, not to take anything away from C4, but I'm pretty happy about a lot of people around the world being able to kind of hear my work. And, it's pretty validating that, a company that I've been with for a long time, I only started working with them about 3 years ago, but I've been going to shows and I've been able to see them grow from 100 people, 150, 250, 350. We packed in, I think, a little bit over 650 last year. Getting there. We're going to have to start booking outdoor baseball stadiums soon, I think, to try to house these people.
You need to come down.
And the main event here, Big Daddy D-Boy.
You need to come west. You need to come to Toronto or Windsor or something. Run a show out here.
Yeah. Well, personally too, I really want to work Toronto. If anybody's listening here from the Toronto region, I really want to work Toronto. It's one of my goals. Hopefully in 2019, 2020, even if it's a one-shot deal, I'd really like to work it. I've set up a lot of personal goals for myself and sort of milestones. And interestingly enough, I've hit a whole bunch of them. I'd say over 75% of the goals I was trying to aim for, I've already hit. And it's been, I think I've got to set loftier ones and more of them because, at this rate, I want to work a lot of places, whether it's post-production, which has been interesting, countries across the world that don't have money to fly me over, but, who want to hear my voice. I'm always available for that. And, I want to be able to sort of work a lot of different companies. Toronto will be one of them for a city, rather. Yeah. And, just to cap it off too, of course, Big Daddy D-Roy versus the Immaculate Ray St. Jean. I know both these guys well, especially Ray. And, that's going to be a humdinger of a main event. No DQ. So the fans, both those guys are going to hurt after the match, but the real winners are going to be the fans for that one.
Well, there's a video also of a mystery wrestler that's going to be showing up. Any idea who that mystery wrestler might be? Or
I have a pretty good idea if the tattoos and the clothes are any indication. It'd be hard pressed for me to make an exact guess though, because if I'm wrong, I look bad to have some egg on my face. But I think it's somebody that the fans in that region might know well, and it might be a local here who's got a lot of hype behind him. I think we were both thinking the same person, but let's wait and see. And guys, follow the Facebook for Seaway Valley. They're rising very quickly, and then you can kind of see who the mystery wrestler is and who some of the new up and comers are coming through the region.
Yeah, I have a pretty good idea as well, but I'm not gonna say any names. I'm not saying any names. I don't want to. But I have a pretty good idea. I think I know who it is. So you're also working for Femme Fatale. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Femme Fatale is 21 in Ottawa.
Femme Fatale. It's French, so the S's are silent at the end. It's Femme Fatale. I realize I'm going way over time in terms of Seaway Valley here, so I'll make it a little shorter for Femme Fatale. But they're happening on February 22nd. It's actually kind of co-sponsored, if you will, by C4. So there's a lot of the same sort of staff working there. It's going to be in the same venue. It's not a C4 show, but there's a lot of connections with them. February 22nd, the premier wrestling company for women in Canada, rivaled only by some of the big ones like Shimmer and Rise in the States. Mercedes Martinez versus Kimberly. I mean, what more needs to be said about two of the absolute best in women's wrestling right now? Jessica Havoc versus Penelope Ford. Penelope has become, I'd say, right beneath Vanessa Craven as kind of the second most popular women's wrestler to ever come through C4. So that'll be a huge thing for our local crowd. Nicole Matthews versus Nicole Savoy. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble here, but that's kind of I know I'm supposed to push everything on the card, but I think that's my personal, most exciting match. I mean, personally, I've seen Portia before, but I've never seen Nicole Matthews as one half of the Canadian Ninjas, and she holds it down. She was one of the people. I remember, I think it was Kimberly who was getting a lot of hype when she had that Dickinson match, when she won the Chikara. I can't remember what title was it. It was the Campeonatos de Parejas, or it was the grand title. But she got a lot of hype being a woman winning men's titles as well, and then sort of that became a big movement. But what I feel like was a little slighted is months before that, Nicole Matthews actually won the ECCW championship out in Vancouver, the biggest company in the west coast of Canada. And she won their heavyweight title, men's title, quote unquote men's title. And just, I guess, because of the region and because it didn't have enough, sort of following as sort of a Chikara, she got kind of swept under the rug there a little bit. And I'm sure she doesn't feel that way, but I kind of said, man, I really want to see this person live. And then Nicole Savoy being the Shimmer champion, she's arguably one of the best in the entire world right now. Inarguably, sorry. One of the best in the entire world. And that's going to be a sleeper match. I don't think it's going to be the main event, but it's the one I'm most excited for. And there's tons of other matches. Check their Facebook out. Their DVD will be out on, I believe, High Spots.
Okay.
But if you can kind of see it live, there's other shows happening too. March 22nd. We can circle back to Femme Fatale in a second, but just so I get all these plugs out.
Yeah, no, I was going to give you time for plugging when we were done with it, but yeah, plug away. Cool.
Let's do it later. I like this conversation we're having. It's been fun. So the Femme Fatale show should be great.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about Allison Kay against Lufisto. That should be an absolutely phenomenal match right there.
I'm kicking myself for not mentioning Lufisto. I mentioned this on a radio conversation. It wasn't really an interview we were having, but just plugging shows recently. And Lufisto is inarguably the most influential women's wrestler we've had in Canada. I want to say almost ever. And I know somebody's going to say, what about a Trish Stratus? What about this? But Trish had the machine behind her. She had the WWE pushing her, putting out t-shirts, putting out merchandise, putting out sort of advertising and everything. Lufisto, from the ground up, took things like going to court to fight a ban on intergender wrestling. That's real. That's not a storyline. She took this, legally up to fight for the right of women's wrestlers. She was a groundbreaking woman in terms of, wrestled in a cage of death. Whatever your thoughts are about hardcore wrestling, that's irrelevant in terms of she wrestled some of the best in the States. Held a title there. Title also held by guys like Kevin Steen and Frankie the Mobster. She main evented a cage of death. Only woman ever to do that, actually, even in its 20th anniversary recently of the cage of death. She's main evented sort of intergender matches. And speaking about just women's wrestling as well, not only about intergender, but I mean, she's one of the people who helped Femme Fatale get off the ground. She, with any wrestling fan, of women's wrestling, she's absolutely in the top list of influential women, and in Canada, she's the absolute, I would say, the groundbreaker, the goddess of professional wrestling here in Canada. And I think she doesn't get her due right now because of, either injuries or medical scares and all these things that kind of have pushed her away from the ring a few years here and there, and not being on TV obviously hurts someone's visibility. But having her versus Allison Kay, and I mean, Allison's great, of course, as well, but I mean, this is Canada. This is Lufisto's backyard. She's living in the States from what I understand now, but this is the country that she made for indie wrestling, and everyone right now wrestling on the scene as a woman owes her a debt of gratitude. I don't mean this in a derogatory way, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but they all owe her a debt of gratitude because the scene and the landscape that is professional wrestling for women right now, Lufisto is absolutely a key person in developing all that in the whole country. Yeah.
Okay.
You probably knew a bunch of that as well, but hopefully there was some new information for a lot of fans about Lufisto.
Well, I just want to say, when I interviewed Al from Seaway, he called you a wrestling encyclopedia, and I absolutely believe that right now, because you know what, I could probably. You're so knowledgeable about everything. It's like I don't even have to say anything. I could keep quiet for 45 minutes and just let you talk.
Oh, Louis, I'm kind of kicking myself. I'm like, oh no, I want Louis to interact here, but I got so much to say.
No, it's perfectly fine, man. No, it's great. I'm learning a lot here. A lot of that stuff about Lufisto I didn't know.
Oh man, I could give you an hour on Lufisto's history. I could give you an hour on hours on ISW, IWS, C4. All the other small indie wrestling companies in Quebec that have sort of grown bigger and that have been around. Guys like Kevin Steen, El Generico, I could give you hours of their history lesson. And I'm focusing on Canada because I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of the scene. But I mean, I have so many old ROH tapes from 2003 as well. I was following adamantly all the Jersey All Pro when they became the indie guys. Like, that was the company to work for. Well before ROH kind of blew up on TV. Well before PWG became like the proving ground for all guys. Like, there were companies out there that were becoming the absolute standard bearers for what indie wrestling was. Guys like Amazing Red, guys like the Hit Squad, Low Key out of there, and, you know, to a lesser degree, guys like Brian XL and the Maximos and setting the world on fire, American Dragon out from the West Coast, Christopher Daniels, all this stuff. Like, I love indie wrestling. I really love it. I love professional wrestling at all levels. And indie wrestling is something I can get involved in and something hopefully I can put my stamp on in even a little degree. And I'm so passionate about all that stuff and all the scene. And it's crazy to see where it's going now, where, you know, 650 people, like, in a little town of Ottawa, which admittedly by everyone's standard is not a big wrestling town, but somehow, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we get like 700, 800 by the end of 2019. I would not be shocked at all as long as our building can hold it.
Sure. Well, AEW, I wanted to ask your thoughts on AEW. And does WWE need to worry about, what's going on with
based on their contract signings, WWE sounds like they're slightly worried. I take that with a little bit of skepticism always because people always try to make Impact, New Japan, and everything out to be competition for WWE. WWE will hurt a little bit, but they're such a gigantic machine on such a scale that it's not even comparable. It's like me trying to say, well, if I leave, is my company going to hurt? Well, they might hurt for a month, like maybe 2 weeks working. I'm not saying wrestling company, I'm saying actually real life job here, but, you know, they might. Yeah. I'm not a huge part of the cog. Like, I'm not a huge part of the machine. I'm a cog in there, and I think AEW is a big part of people are getting excited, and rightfully so. They're having so many signings, and it's absolutely exciting to see where they're at. Are they going to impact WWE's bottom line? Kind of. Not okay. Like they won't run them out of business, that's for sure. But AEW and all the workings that I've heard and some of the backstage stuff that I've been listening to, and the signings, obviously it's making a huge impact. And what I gather from this, and of course me being the lover of indie wrestling I am, it's that people are waking up to the realization that you don't necessarily need WWE to be successful. Guys have been showing it, like the Bucks previously and Cody Rhodes, but I mean much more guys that are going to be able to afford to have a life that's pure wrestling, and that says wonders for the state of wrestling, and that says wonders for the future of wrestling. AEW, if anything, is a beacon that will help guys realize that they can succeed without the WWE behind them. And I'm excited to see where they go. I'm excited to see a lot of their talent. I'm a huge fan of a lot of the guys that they've signed so far. And to see where it's going, it's super exciting. I wait with bated breath. I will still be a fan of my local scene. I will still be a fan of Ontario and Quebec wrestling above all else. But AEW will be a very cool second place, I think.
Who's the best wrestler in Canada right now? I think it's Josh Alexander.
Josh Alexander.
There you go. I know you got Marcus Burke out in the Maritimes claiming he's the best wrestler in Canada, but I think it's Josh Alexander 100%.
I've called the Burke match, actually. Him versus, and this is going to be wild if you want to go buy the DVD or find it, NSPW main event. My first and only NSPW I called for. At the time, that was a record attendance as well. I think, I want to say slightly over 700 or something, but okay. Marcus Burke versus Sin Bodhi. You remember Kazarni from the WWE?
Oh, yeah.
In a, what match did he put on? I think he calls it the Circus Death Match.
Okay.
So it's half circus freak show type of stunt show, half wrestling match. And it was wild. There was dart throwing into the back. There was cutting up of watermelons. There was, they were actually on Botchamania because they tried to break the table about 18 times. And so that was wild. Marcus Burke, you know, he talks a big game, and I would put him in one of the tops, but I don't think he's the top right now. Not a slight against him. It's Josh Alexander, and people would say guys like Mike Bailey are up there as well. Ethan Page. I mean, Josh, I think, in the way he says it, Ethan Page is better than him. I think that's what he says. I think he's being humble.
What about Tyson Dukes? What about Tyson Dukes?
Tyson's amazing. He's a legend. He should have been signed by WWE multiple times over. I know he's worked for them a cajillion times as enhancement as well, but he should have been. Tyson's right up there along the upper echelon. Guys coming up like Matt Angel are making big waves here. Josh is my personal favorite, and then there's all the tag teams. Like, we're a hotbed for tag team wrestling, it seems like, in the last while, too, and obviously pushed by TDT. They get the biggest reactions in C4 once you get to live. I think there's nothing like seeing TDT live in a C4 venue. They somehow have captured the minds and spirits of all the wrestling fans here, and it sounds like an Steve Austin Raw appearance when they come out. There's just this place goes bonkers, and it's so cool to see. And March 22nd, they're going to have a six-man tag match too against the Butcher and the Blade, one of my personal favorite tag teams too. TDT versus Butcher and the Blade. There's not been much announcements on the show, still early, but that's one of them that I know of. Okay. Jonathan Rukin's going to defend his new title as well. March 22nd, C4. I don't have much more info on that show, but if you catch up on all their stuff on independent wrestling TV, it's if you're a new fan and you're just kind of hesitating because you got a lot of stuff in your personal life time wise, or you got to watch a lot of Raw or SmackDown or whatever the case may be, give it a shot. You're going to love it. If you don't, you can personally tweet me some angry stuff at Dr.Bob commentary, and you can let me know. But guaranteed, you're going to like it. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, there's no way a true wrestling fan could watch C4 and say, I don't like this. I was hooked from the first match when I started watching.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Louis. Your favorite wrestler, it sounds like, or the guy that got hooked was Bruno. Yeah. Nobody on C4 wrestles like Bruno, but you can see the same passion, you can see the same professionalism and all that, and excitement through a wrestling company that has a different style. But, regardless of styles, you'll see how the fans react to all this stuff, and it's great. It's something you gotta catch. April 4th too, there's an ISW show, Interspecies Wrestling, that's happening at WrestleMania Week. I'm not gonna be on that one, but I am on their other shows, so I plug them as one of my favorites. I've been watching them forever, and I've got the chance to work with them over the last two shows. Okay. They're gonna be live on Fight TV as well. Okay. And their main event is an ISW Fans Bring the Legos deathmatch. Okay. They're the inventors of Legos in wrestling. Addy Starr, Matt Tremont, Jeff Cannonball, the returning Viking, all in a four-way. There's Eddie versus Swoggle, aka Hornswoggle. Sexy Eddie, of course. There's Bastion Snow's International Food Fight, and there's a whole rest of a wild card there. It's insanity. Go catch it on Fight TV. Be there live if you're in the area. And I'll be on plenty of shows when they come back to Canada, of course. Okay, one of my favorites. I want to get your thoughts. I'm sure you have positive thoughts on this wrestler, Kobe Durst. Another one of my absolute favorites. What your thoughts on Kobe Durst? I know Kobe well. Like, you know what's funny? The first show that I did commentary for, I did 2 matches on the pre-show. It was, let me just pull up my notes here. Hellbenders, April 15th, 2016, was my first show I ever called. And, Kobe was one of the 2 guys on the dark match. One of the 2 matches, we had 2 dark matches. So like my first night of commentary, I had a Kobe Durst match. He went from there, being on cars, being on dark matches, and, kind of bouncing back and forth, to becoming they're one of their top champions of all time. He recently lost the belt, only in December. But, he's a champion everywhere for good reason. In the States and Canada, he's had some record-breaking title runs around, and he's in competition for best wrestler in Canada, absolutely. And the guy's I don't want to spoil anything, but it's said online before, so I'm not really breaking any secrets. But he's 23 or 24. Yeah, he's 23 years old. 23 years old. Yeah. I feel like he's been in the main event for the last 4 or 5 years now and everywhere. And I'm I don't know what you were doing at 23, 24, but I definitely was not on everybody's TV on on main events and traveling all over the place. Like,
yeah.
that guy's got a rocket strapped to his back, and he's going to go anywhere he wants
Absolutely.
to. Like, if he wants to get to Japan, if he wants to get to Europe, if he wants to just main event anywhere he wants to, he's got the world of potential. I kind of tell him sometimes he's got to comment with the bumps, like taking a pile driver down a set of stairs, or like a DVD off of a scaffold onto the floor. Not super the best thing ever, but I can't knock his results. The man is a dynamo.
Yeah, and every time, there's a live stream on Powerbomb TV, or it's called actually Independent Wrestling now, sorry, it seems like Kobe Durst is on the show. It's like Black Label Pro, Freelance Wrestling, of course, C4. Yeah. I was at I met him at PWA Canada here in Kitchener. Really nice guy. It was, against Nolan Pink, was a fantastic match. Really nice guy, and, big fan of Kobe Durst. He's, like you said, 23 years old. Think 10 years from now what his accomplishments are going to be. He's going
to be on every, if he isn't already on your mind in terms of like a wrestler of the year type of quality match, he's going to be on everybody's come this time next year. Anywhere in Canada, anywhere in the States that he wants to travel, it's going to be Kobe Durst's year in 2019, 2020 in terms of a guy who might not be known by every single wrestling fan out there, but is going to be one of those guys. The same way that Mike Bailey turned into like everybody's favorite wrestler in the span of 2 years, Kobe Durst is gonna try to get that level too, I'm sure.
Do you have a favorite match that you called? I know you've called many matches, but do you have a personal favorite match that you called?
Emotional, sentimentally, I have a few. Absolute tops, I might figure it out by the time I finish the sentence, but okay. The first match I ever called was two local guys here, Decker Lockhart versus Colin. What was he going by then? Colin Oliver. That was the same night as I called that Kobe match, Kobe versus Dino Benjamin. That one is right up there because first match I ever called. This year, one of my favorites was Tyson Dukes versus Pepper Parks, also known as Braxton Sutter, previously in Impact.
Yep.
I know he doesn't like the Braxton name, so Pepper Parks. I've heard some people talk about that match online, calling it their favorite match in independent wrestling in 2018. So go check that out on independent wrestling. That was high up there. Teddy Hart in a 6-man tag match this year, it's crazy. I've been talking about it with my co-commentator Adam B, who works with me on a lot of shows. Absolutely one of the best guys to work with. And he's like, I think Kobe was the MVP not Kobe, sorry. I think Teddy was the MVP of 2018 somehow. It's like Teddy Hart, after all these years in wrestling, had some sort of career resurgence, and now is one of the absolute top guys. Won a PCO in his meteoric rise. I got to call, you might not remember this, but I got to call his return to full-time professional wrestling.
Okay.
His first match back at GNW. Him versus a gigantic human being, Max Testosterone, aka Max Lemire, aka Big Max.
Okay.
That was his first match back. He had 1 or 2 matches a year for the last 2-3 years before then, but from then he started to wrestle every weekend, and I got to call that. So that's in my absolute top 3, 4, 5 matches. And also recently when I got to call Braxton Sutter, he's gonna hit me. Pepper Parks.
Pepper Parks, okay.
Pepper Parks and Andy Williams, aka Butcher and the Blade versus PDT. They had been on my bucket list to call, so that match was absolute favorite. I think personal favorite, my first match was my favorite just because of the emotional ties. But I've called so many amazing wrestlers, so many great talents. I've called some absolute legends in wrestling, and it is a pleasure every time, whether you are starting off fresh and whether you're new, like some of my good friends, Alexander Cable and Thomas Leduc, who are just starting off their careers this year. Whether you're guys like that, whether you guys have been on WWE TV and been all over the world, it is a pleasure on every level for any wrestler that I've called who risks a lot of their health to be out there and entertain the fans. It's an absolute honor to call everybody at every level. And, whether I want to say it's my favorite or not, it doesn't really matter because it's what the fans enjoy. And if they've enjoyed some of my calls, then thank you very much for being a fan of mine. I appreciate that.
Well, I can safely say that I'm definitely a fan of Dr. Bob, of you. So I think you do a great job, with C4. Of course, every time C4 gets on Powerbomb TV, I watch it. You always do a great job. I told you, yesterday I liked when, what was your, the person that does the announcing with you on C4? I forgot his name again.
C4 is Adam B.
Yeah, when he mentioned, Josh Alexander as the Destiny champion, you're like, whoa, hold on. That was yesterday. Today is C4. I like the way let's not talk about Destiny. This is C4. I kind of like how you did that there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And you do a great job. So before we wrap this up, Dr. Bob, is there anything else that you want to plug?
I've plugged all the shows. Thanks. I plugged all the shows happening. Sayway Valley 2, Torture Chamber Pro Wrestling Showcase Sunday 14. I didn't get to. They're more a live show than tape. So come on out to that if you're in the Montreal region. That's happening February 17th. The Femme Fatale Show, February 22nd. March 22nd for C4. I mentioned these quickly, but you can check all these out on Facebook. They're all there, and they're great shows. ISW WrestleMania Week. All these shows, a lot of them have reoccurring monthly shows. Not everybody there, but many of them. So check them out at your convenience, and coming out to a live show. My personal stuff online, I don't have a huge social media presence. I mean, I'm not a professional wrestler. I get that. I understand where I am on the scale. But
Sure.
Dr. Bob, your commentator of choice on Facebook, and Dr. Bob Commentary on Twitter as well. Check me out on those. Drop me some comments if you like my stuff. If you didn't like it, try to be nice. But, check me out there. And if you're in Toronto, if you're across seas, you hear my stuff, and I've reached out to a few people in places like, I think Ireland, Spain, some other companies. Hopefully, I've got a good line on potentially working somewhere like a Korea and Japan in the future.
Okay.
I'll probably tell you offline, but, that some of that stuff might be coming up in the next year, so I'm super excited for that, and all over the States too. Somehow I've gotten into Europe and a bit of Asia, but not into the States yet. So call me up if you want me to work some post-production from the States. I'm always happy to be on some podcasts, have some interviews with people. Obviously, the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network is my favorite here, but
thank you.
follow them online as well. But if you guys want me on some other calls, I'm happy to. And check me out, check out my work. Call me up if you're a promoter. Let me get on your next show, and I promise you, I will be prepared and have a lot of wrestling knowledge. Louis, I could have spoken for like 10 hours. I apologize if I took up too much time on something like this.
It's funny because I joked before I hit the record button saying we could go on for 5 hours. You're like, oh no, we're not going to go on. We could actually go on for another 4 hours, man.
Yeah. Hey, I could give you 4 hours. I could give you 4 hours just on C4 right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dr. Bob. I don't think Myron's ever going to get to interview you again because I want you back on my show. I don't want you to talk to him anymore. I want you to be with me.
All right.
Going forward. So Myron, if you're listening, sorry, but you can't have Dr. Bob anymore. He's
Hey, Dr. Bob Part 2. Let's go over what were you talking about? 70s WWF was that era? Let's do a full show on 70s WWF.
I'm down for that. 70s and I was late 70s or early 80s. I could.
I can do a full hour right off the top of my head on late 70s, early 80s with you right now if we want. So let's do that for part 2.
You know what? I'm 100% in. I say let's do it. I guess that's it. I guess we'll wrap this up and we'll be back with part 2. We'll be talking about are you serious? You wanna do this again or?
No, anything you want. You give me a topic, give me an hour of preparation, and we can talk about anything. If you want to do an hour on Gordon Sully, I can too.
Okay, all right. So, sounds good to me. Well, this has been the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. I'm your host, Louis Carlin. Again, I want to thank my very special guest, Dr. Bob, announcer extraordinaire. And until next time, there's going to be a part 2. Until next time, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye. And stay safe, everyone. So long. Bye-bye.